You're a game maker. You make games. You're a game developer. This is your whole job. Use this thing.
Good morning, Matt.
Hey, Mike.
We are doing the podcast now, just in case you weren't aware.
Oh, okay. I will stop swearing.
Thank you for your attention to this matter. Welcome back to Hacking the Grepson. We are still in our second season where we are making a game! Exclamation mark.
We're in our games era.
Games era, yeah. No more of those evergreen topics. Now we're like, this is happening now. You are finding out what we're doing right now. And this episode, I think... Let's see. Just a quick recap. We had our first episode where we're like, let's make a game. Oh my gosh, what does that even mean? And then we started talking about what kinds of games we like and what we like and don't like in games and maybe some features of them. This last time period between the last episode and now, I've been spending more time thinking about the editor or IDE that we would use to make this game. I mean, you could ostensibly write a game all in a text editor, but that would probably take a long time. And you'd be rewriting a lot of stuff that other people have already figured out and probably made easier. So I figured that was not the way to go. So one of the engines that you told me about that I'd never heard of before is called Defold or Defold, or I'm not sure how you say it.
I think it's Defold.
Defold. Okay, so it's like Unfold, but Defold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before, but it's free and open source. And so I downloaded it and I finally spent some time recently checking out one of their platformer tutorials, which is basically like you start the game and you have an avatar, you can move it around, you can jump, you're in like one room with some platforms that you can jump up and down on. It has basic collision logic so that you don't walk through a wall or fall through the floor. It has like air resistance. If you jump and move, it kind of slows, you have gravity and your horizontal movement is a little bit, it's got all the basics, but there's no goal, there's no power-ups, there's no enemies, your character can't do anything but move. There's no way to finish it except to exit it. So it's just a starter kit. But It was just enough for me to mess around with Defold and see okay, how does the editor work? How do I change stuff? How do I add things? And so I took that and I added a few things to it, like you couldn't duck, so I added the ability to duck. You couldn't double jump, so I added the ability to double jump. There was no, status or display about anything that was happening, so I added a jump counter to it. So every time you jump, a little number goes up. I added zoom controls, so when you make games these days, whether it's 2D or 3D, you have a camera. And, kind of metaphor where you're seeing something on the screen and that's being provided to you as if you were looking at it through a camera. If it's 2D, it's usually everything is flat. Everything is on the same plane, like the same Z-axis. There's no foreground, background. If you were playing a 3D game, you would have that. But in the 2D game, this platformer thing, there was none of that. But the camera has different features. It can focus on something. By default, it focuses on your character. So when you move, it follows the character. If it didn't do that...
Which is what you usually want.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're like, where did I go?
Yeah, exactly. Even if you go all the way back to something like Super Mario Brothers, as you're moving across the screen, the camera is kind of locked on to the center of the screen. Yeah. So if you move, you can't really get past the middle of the screen before the camera starts kind of following your character.
The first game I can think of that didn't do that was actually Zelda, where you had
Right.
a static screen you wandered around. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of games before that, but there weren't a lot of games where you were doing something.
Yeah, I would...
Pong didn't follow the ball.
Right. I would say, much like this platformer tutorial that they give you, Pong and Zelda are actually the OG perspective, where the camera is just one scene and you can
Yeah.
move around in this rectangle. And if you move to like a boundary, it might open up a new rectangle with new stuff.
Yeah.
And
The way I
so
like it. I like my new rectangles.
yeah, exactly. So and they might call those like scenes. So you like move from scene A to scene B to scene C, and you might eventually get to a scene that has like an exit or something, and that completes the level or whatever. So this platformer one is actually a little more modern because the camera is following your character and it's moving and following them inside a level that is kind of static. So anyway, that's really what I spent my time doing in the last period is playing with Defold, putting several solid hours into it, messing around with the editor, getting a feeling for how you do various things. And I have thoughts about it. I have thoughts about the editor. I have thoughts about the 2D platformer in general, but I feel like I've gone on for several minutes now, and I'm curious, Matt, what have you been doing in the time therein?
Well, I was wondering if we should go back a bit as to how we got to Default,
Yeah.
right? What I did mostly was look at different game engines.
Okay.
Over the last 2 weeks. I haven't done a lot in Default itself other than compare it to other things and be like, yeah, that seems like the right choice. You actually put together a whole giant document on the differences between the different engines, but I'll talk kind of to my experience of what I looked at. The main one I looked at to start with was called Love 2D, and I really liked a lot of things about that engine. Principally, the main thing I liked was that I didn't feel like I was tied into anyone else's editor. I actually did all the editing in it in Vim because I'm a glutton.
Old school.
For punishment. But also because of where I was doing the development. I also played around with having Claude Code just write me a game in Default or in Love 2D, and it just did it, and it worked, which was surprisingly easy.
Yeah.
So there is that. That's nice. Ultimately, I think what drove me away from Love 2D for our purposes is which platforms it could support from a perspective of like releasing. And I think you and I both would like to be able to play these things, whatever we make, like potentially on our phone or something, which means probably a web browser or specifically cross-compiling to iOS.
Yeah.
Which has its own set of problems with paying for a developer license and whatnot, but we'll get into that when we get to it. But like being able to do HTML5, right?
Yeah.
And then pull it up in a web browser on our phones sounds fun. And Love 2D didn't natively do that. I don't remember if it did it at all, but it certainly didn't do it out of the box. If I were to look at your document, which I had handy before I tried to do all the other things this morning, I would probably know the answer to this.
Yeah, it's weird you say that because it does say that it exports to... Oh, wait, hold on. I think I was looking at the wrong... No, it does say it exports to all the major desktops and mobile.
I think did it not do HTML? Was it specifically that?
I mean, I have web on here, which is HTML5, but...
Oh. Well, then maybe I was wrong and we should use it.
I mean, but both of these engines use Lua as their scripting language, so it would be a pretty easy, go back and forth.
Yeah. Now, was Love 2D the one that we discovered was the one that Balatro was written in?
Yes.
Which is that's just wild.
It's the poster child of Love 2D now, yeah.
So I found that itself interesting. It's very small. It's open source. There's a lot of good things to love about this particular platform. Now, that said, if we're just like, hey, let's learn game dev, and we'll do it for our computers, and if we really like it, we'll export it to iOS or whatever, it's probably a good choice.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't done any finished products or projects in Love 2D, but it seems very similar to my favorite Pico 8 and TIC 80, fantasy console, lo-fi, restrained ones.
Although, unlike Pico 8, it's free.
Right. It is free. The one thing that I don't remember about Love 2D is whether it has built-in Sprite or audio editors, and that's the one thing that really drew me to Pico 8.
Editors? No.
Yeah.
It does not have editor. It doesn't have an IDE. I don't believe.
Right. It doesn't have an IDE, so it kind of forces you to go outside and use external tools to make all that, right? Which, is not the end of the world, but it is a concern and a factor when it comes to like how many tools do we really want to use to make a game.
Yeah. And, there's something to be said for doing the Unix philosophy of do one thing and do it well, which I believe Love 2D kind of aims to do. And I really liked that aspect of it. But yeah, if you want to use it, it looks like it has 0 built-in art tools. So you'd go off and use like GIMP or something if you want to stick in the open source community, or something else. I don't have a huge problem with that, other than, like you said, you're the one who's probably going to end up doing more of the art side of this stuff than me, especially the music.
Yeah.
So if that is not, if that's a thing that would be, I don't want to deal with that kind of situation, I would say we don't deal with it. And I think that's, and I've used, well, I'll shut up for a second. Did you try Love 2D out at all? Out of curiosity, other than you said you looked at it.
Well, I tried Love 2D in that I took the like slingshot mechanic project that you made and I pulled it in and I modified it a little and sent it back to you and you saw it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I had played with Love 2D before this project, but it's been a while and I haven't done a lot. And so I mean, I have no problem with Love 2D in general as an IDE, or not as an IDE, as an engine, or as a way to make a game. I will just say that, like I said, it feels similar to Pico 8 and Tech 80.
Yeah.
They all use Lua. I mean, that seems like the scripting language that we're going to be using almost no matter which one we choose, because they all use something like that. And I do like the built-in sprite editing capabilities of Pico 8, but it is also admittedly lo-fi and 8-bit and not meant to be high-res or complicated, which is a feature, not a bug.
Like by design.
Yeah. Exactly. And I've done those, and I've done several games in that style, and so I'm not sure I'm like excited about doing that because I've done it. Maybe you're more excited about it because you haven't done it. I don't know.
I kind of where I landed on Love 2D was that it would be really fun for me when I'm messing around with something and I just want to try out an idea real quick. Mm-hmm. It seems like a quick go-to draw box and make it do a thing language. Like I took 2 of their examples and very quickly, like in one evening, I'd never heard of Love. I went from barely having heard of Love 2D to having taken 2 of their tutorial examples, not read any of the stuff about them whatsoever, just looked at them and was able to combine them into a different mechanic, right? But originally it was like you click the button, you click the mouse, and this little square shoots a ball, right? And I was like, oh, that's neat. Let's turn it into a slingshot mechanic. So then I ended up with like you click the box and you drag back and then let go and then it flies, and I added physics so it falls down. And I'm like, that was cool. It was really easy to use. I really liked that aspect of it. I didn't have to go learn anything else. I was just like, it reminded me of honestly like Pygame or like even coding in BASIC, where like I didn't have to really think about doing. It did what I wanted it to do without me thinking about it, for a very simple thing. And I imagine the more complex I got, the harder it would get to do that.
No,
some other ones. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I totally agree. Yeah, the draw of Love 2D and Pico 8 and Tech 80 and stuff like that is they have the basic game type methods built in for graphics and audio and an event loop and updating animation, like that kind of, like, it's like they know what you're making with this. You're not making a spreadsheet with these things. You're making a thing that you're going to play with like a toy, and then maybe if you get serious about it, you make a full-blown game with it. And so they have those methods built in, and that's, you can immediately get into it and start making something that's cool and draws something. I remember when I first started learning QBasic back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I wanted to do. Like, the first thing I wanted to do is like, okay, how do I draw a line? How do I make a square? How do I make a circle? How do I make it move? How do I start a program that immediately lets me start doing something interesting? And then, I spent my professional career making websites with largely static content and CRUD applications. Yeah. But, when I'm doing it on my own, I'm like, I just want to make something cool that does something fun.
Yeah, and quick. Like I don't want to spend a bunch of my time getting set up in their environment, right? And that's, I think, my problem with most game engines that I've used, is to jump in requires setup.
Yes.
Like, and not trivial setup usually. It's like, get a sprite map loaded and do this. And I'm like, just draw me a box and let me move it around the screen with arrow keys without me thinking about it, and I'll make it pretty later. I'm trying to test out an idea. I don't care what it looks like right now.
Yeah.
And those are not always as easy as I'd like them to do.
I agree.
Like them to be.
I agree, and I think, if we move beyond the ones we've been talking about, and we move into something like Defold or Godot or GameMaker or even Unity, they have full blown IDEs. Like, you start up an application and you create a project, and there is it's like VS Code except with extras in that you have like a tree, just directory tree with all of your files. You have palettes that are like contextual depending on which kind of file you're working on. In order to, they have a build, run your project thing as opposed to just like refreshing a web browser or something like I'm usually used to.
So let's actually talk about some of those.
Okay.
I did look at a couple of those.
Okay.
I also looked at Pico 8, which I think actually is somewhat similar in that it does have its own IDE where you can do sprite editing and music editing and whatnot. But it's horrible. I really don't like using it because it is like dog fooding itself and it looks 8-bit. And so then you go edit your code and you're trying to do it in there and you're like, this is terrible. Oh, I could go pay for this and download it and then change to my editor. And I was like, I think I'm good now. But I did try that.
Okay.
Pygame does not have an editor.
It's just Python.
I did not try that again this time because I've used it so much in the past. Hopefully it's gotten better than 20 years ago or whatever when I last looked at it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just Python. You write Python code. Love 2D was just, you write code.
Yep.
Right. You write Lua. I think it was just straight up Lua. I think Pico 8 I think has it's like basically Lua. I think how that ended up. There's like Lua with some domain specific languages on it. Because our friend told us to check it out, I looked at Bevy, which uses Rust as a language. My takeaway from looking at that was if you really care about performance, use Bevy. Mm-hmm. And I don't.
Well, and also we'd have to learn Rust, which admittedly is a language I have not used and is not beginner friendly to learning a language, I think.
Yeah. But if I'm going to learn Lua or Rust, I think I'd rather learn Lua. I haven't used it before, and I like where it is used is the kind of situation that I would like to be able. It's the kind of thing I like doing, as opposed to Rust, which is like, all right, let me get some low level stuff going on.
Right.
Although I did check out the syntax of Rust, and it seemed pretty nice. It's often like what people go to instead of C and C++, I think, these days when they're trying to get performant, and it looks nothing like that, which I liked. So I looked at GameMaker a little bit. Mm-hmm. GameMaker was kind of like Unity. I felt like both of them were kind of in the same category. If here's this big, you're a game maker. You make games. You're a game developer. This is your whole job. Use this thing. Get used to it. And once you know this system, man, you can make the best game. I don't want to do that. That's just like I am already a developer. Make it so that my developerness can make games is
interesting.
Right. And that's where those previous ones land.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go learn an entire ecosystem just to go do that. Plus it costs money. I'm cheap. GameMaker also has its own language, GML.
Yeah.
I think Unity is just C#, right? Neither of which I know.
Yes.
Although C# at least is a language that is useful to know. Like from a career perspective, potentially you could do C#.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I think Lua, if you're going to learn a scripting language and you've never learned a scripting language, obviously learn JavaScript because it's useful everywhere. But Lua is a close second because it's similar enough and it's used in at least half of these game engines on this chart. So
yeah. My guess is, because Lua seems to be used in the same way that I started to see Lisp used briefly in the late 90s, where it was like I assume it's really easy to add a Lua interpreter into your project is my guess, because it seems to be used for in that way. And I saw the same thing with Lisp back in the day. There was games and like the basic engine would be written in like C++, and then it had a Lisp interpreter, and you could use that to like add some of the more interesting logic, like the more fun, the parts that to me that are fun. the actual logic of the game, and not all the crap about drawing it to the screen, which is less interesting.
Yeah.
So that kind of left us with Godot and Default.
Yes. Both two
And
syllables.
so, yes.
And open
They
source.
sound remarkably similar. Looking at them, I've used Godot before. It's good. Godot leans a little bit heavier on the IDE, was my takeaway from that, and has its own custom scripting engine, GD script, or maybe it's Visual Script, or maybe one went into became the other. I can't remember. I think it also does C# if you get a certain version of it. But that again, it felt very like, hey, you're someone who wants to make games professionally and learn this whole. And I'm like, again, I don't know if that's where I am. Maybe if that's what you want to do, we can figure it out. And then Default kind of, to me, felt like the sort of the default that fell out. So I was looking at everything else.
It won by default.
Default won by default. Exactly. It kept not being rejected is what it was. Like every time I would look at something, I was like, okay, but that's, and it was the Goldilocks, I think, is where it was. It was just right. So you can do most of it in code, but also there's an IDE, and you do need to use it a little bit for some stuff.
Yeah.
But not everything. It is not an all-in-one like Godot or GameMaker or Unity. It's closer to code, but it has the stuff that you mentioned earlier where it's like, now I have to go have extra tools to do these other things.
Yeah, the thing with Defold is that I started it from a different place than I would start Love 2D or Pico 8 or Pygame or something like that, in that I took an existing project and modified it. I was trying to think, how do I learn something?
That's not how you always do it?
No, when you like Pico 8, I mean, sure, I looked at other people's projects to see how they did stuff, but the thing is, when you just do a new Pico 8 project, it just gives you basically like the three main methods, which are like, drawing, updating, and like init. So basically, every game starts with those methods, and every method beyond that is something you add. But really, like, every game at its core is just like, oh, you have a bunch of variables. You have a loop that updates things like, people moving, enemies getting shot, whatever. And then you have a draw function, which paints that to the screen. And then, where do those things come from? Oh, you got to make some sprites. Oh, it's too quiet. Oh, make some sound. And then there's a few methods that like draw a specific sprite to the screen or move it or whatever. And then there's a method that plays sound effects or music. It was just like it was the absolute minimum. Platonic ideal of what a video game is. And so I didn't feel the need.
It's a complete blank slate for you to kind of jump in.
Yeah, but it has.
Here's all the things you need to do something, but I'm not doing anything for you.
Right. Just fill in these boxes and then hit go, and you have a game, and then go from there. Whereas something like Defold or Godot, like you said, it has an IDE. It has things inside the IDE that you're meant to use. I mean, you can open up a lot of the files in a Defold project in a text editor, but there are definitely things that you want to use the IDE for, like if you have sprite sheets and if you have animations and particle effects and et cetera, or you're making scenes that have tiles in them, level 1 scene, here's all the tiles in it, and here's a script for that level specifically. So I went at Defold, and I would go at Godot or Unity, or we didn't even put it on the list, Unreal Engine. I forgot about that one. That's another engine. With opening up an existing one, because it's so intimidating, there's so much stuff. I just want to start from something that works and then be like, okay, now what game do I want to make? And then like get rid of, almost like a block of clay, like get rid of the stuff that isn't my game and then add the extra stuff that is.
Okay, Michelangelo.
But I'm just saying like that's how I found myself enjoying and getting to know Defold, is I took the platformer tutorial and then I started changing the stuff I didn't like about it and adding the stuff that was missing. And I think if I kept at it and had an idea of a kind of game I wanted to make, I could eventually move that into something that I liked. Or the experience I got from that, I'd be like, okay, now I know how to do the stuff I need to do, new project, and then go.
And you just described exactly my process for working on things.
Okay.
Is I find something that I'm allowed to use. I don't go steal someone's actual like game, but I find a thing that's like, here's a platformer tutorial, or here's a Zelda-like tutorial, or here's a box that shoots pellets out when you click the mouse on the screen. And I'm like, cool, let's make it better. And I like that approach a lot for developing things, for learning things in particular, because I basically learn by asking questions. And so I look at something like that and I'm like, cool, how did they do that?
Exactly.
Or, oh, that's neat, but what if we had gravity? How do I do that? Right? And that's how I end up adding to things. And I like that. And I think any of these, once we get like the baseline, here's our main framework game,
Yeah.
is easy enough to do that too. But it's getting to that initial, like, how hard is it to get to that initial, we're moving a character around in the environment that we want, in the style that we want them to move, be it 2D platformer or 2D top down or isometric or, God forbid, first person.
Yeah, I mean, when I was working with the 2D platform, I was like, you know what? Everything I've ever done is 2D. Maybe I should start a 3D one just to see what that's like. I mean, I've played plenty of 3D games. Most games that come out these days that are like, double or triple A are 3D, third person, first person, something like that. Yeah. You only see the 2D stuff in like the indie game space. So I'm like, yeah, maybe I should try that. Maybe I would like get really inspired if I just had a 3D engine in front of me and I could manipulate it. I'm like, okay, what do I want to do with this? But, it brings me back to a point I wanted to make. I brought up this project to two different people over the last couple of weeks, and I mentioned how we were thinking about how we wanted to make the game, like what engine, what language, that kind of stuff, the like mechanical part of this.
Yeah.
And both of them were like, that's interesting. That's kind of backwards of the way I would think about making the game. I would think about it as like, I have the kernel of an idea of a game, and then I would go forth and figure out how to make it. Not how do I make a game, and then, okay, now what kind of game do I want to make, which is what we seem to be doing. And I thought that was an interesting point.
Well, I think we talked about what kind of game we wanted to make in previous episodes.
We did, but we didn't exactly like say, okay, we're making this game. Now, how do we make that game? We're like, well, here's some ideas of games, but we don't really know
That's
what
fair.
kind. So let's try out these ways of making a game and see how they feel, like trying on, I don't know, trying
Different
out
hats.
cars or something like to go on our journey.
I don't know. I have so many ideas that what I usually find for myself when I'm working on a project, unless I very specifically, I'm like, I want to create this thing right now by this date or whatever, because maybe I have a use for it or whatever. I find I'm a much more improv-y developer, I think. I poke around. Oh, that's kind of neat. Oh, that's kind of neat. Oh, what if I do this? And I slowly tweak it. I'm like, oh, hey, this could be a game. And then it becomes a game. That's how Shut the Box started. I was like, how does iOS programming work? How do I make a button? Oh, what if I make 9 buttons? Oh, what if...
Hey, this is starting to look like
What
something.
if it's a calculator? Yeah. Oh, hey, this reminds me of that game I used to play. Hey, it's this game I used to play now.
Yeah, I mean,
I bet I could release this.
I think what our process here is like, we've both made games, we play games, we know what games are, we've played a lot of different games, we like a lot of different kinds of games. The space is still huge. So what we're doing right now is kind of like programmer doodling. We're doodling in a sketch pad, like, oh, what's this defold thing? All right, well, let's mess around with this for a while and see if anything comes from it. And I spent several hours messing with that platformer tutorial, and I'm like, okay, I think I kind of understand how defold works. But in the end, it also kind of brought up more questions, because I'm like, okay, this is a sprite-based 2D platformer. That means there's sprites. That means there's sprite animations. When I've played other games, like in Pico 8, when I've made those didn't use, like this is literal PNGs, like bitmap images that are then like played in succession, like in an animation, whether you're like idle or you're walking or you're jumping or you're falling.
Which is how all sprite systems work.
Right, but
except how they load the image.
Right, and in this kind of game, and I assume a lot of modern 2D games, they create a sprite sheet which has all the different sprites for all the animations, and then you choose which one to play depending on the state of the game. Whereas in Pico 8 or Tick 8 or whatever, my sprites were 16 by 16 pixel images that I was making in the editor, and you could modify individual pixels as you're playing, like dynamically, that it was that low level. Whereas, in the platform and Default, they were PNGs that are less malleable. And while that's cool because you have them and they're nice and high res and they look cool, it's not as tinkery-able as something as low level as pixel based art. And so I'm like, do I want to make I'm going to have to make all these PNGs. I'm going to have to make all the different states of an animation of a character as opposed to being able to program them, which sounds fun. So do I want to do that, or do I want to switch to 3D and then have a model that is more programmable, that can be rotated and scaled, and that you don't have to draw each individual frame of animation. You just have a model that can be mathematically changed. That sounds
And I think
fun.
you just described why people moved away from sprites in a lot of development. I personally like the way sprites look more.
I do too, but they're harder to use, I think.
But I feel like it's probably something that could be more easily generated these days. Like, I feel like it wouldn't be too hard to be like, here's my sprite. Hey, AI, like draw like my 2D character. Hey, AI, take this 2D character and like make the animation frames for it and put that in.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's tweening. Like a lot of them have the idea of tweening. I mean, even CSS has the idea of tweening, where you have like two states and it dynamically creates the parts in between.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could do that.
And so like, well, and I think that's the other thing, right? Is like, what parts are we interested in doing? I am not interested in drawing sprites. Like that's not. I'm not gonna do it. But that's not the part of this where I'm like, ooh, I'm going to game. That's going to be so much fun. I know people who really enjoy the art side of video gaming, right? Who want to draw that back, like who look at something like the old Sierra adventure games or
LucasArts.
Or the LucasArts ones. And they're like, that background is gorgeous. I want to draw that. And then like, oh yeah, I guess you have to be able to walk on it. So here's the path. And I'm like, cool, good for you. Or like you love doing the music. I don't like doing that. Right. I'm like, I don't need sound. I'll do Foley, like for sound effects. That's the part that would be interesting to me. But ultimately, I think one of the things that is silly about the current world from a game dev perspective is how much focus people make on making things realistic in games. I don't care about my game being realistic at all, like how it looks. I think we should be able to have like a Super Metroid game that fully takes advantage of like a game like that level of graphics, but make it so big that it could take advantage of like a PS5, right? This computer can do all these things. And we're pushing it to its boundaries by like worrying about realistic graphics and like fully voiced audio and all that stuff. And I'm like, how about you just give me a really cool 32-bit, I'll bump it up from Super Metroid a little bit, giant Metroidvania. And there are ones out there that do that.
Yeah.
But a lot of them push the bounds by saying, okay, well, let's just make this a 3D model. Which I think makes the dev side easier, and there's something to be said for that from us, right? How much of this do we want to mess with?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's ultimately going to decide what thing we use, engine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Default does 2D and 3D. I just haven't messed with it.
Yeah.
I mean, love 2D. Obviously, only does 2D. If we go into something like Godot or Game Maker, I'm pretty sure they have 3D stuff.
They have both, yeah.
Yeah.
I think ultimately we want to make a 2D game, but a lot of 2D games you can make using certain 3D elements. And then doing the physics still in 2D.
Yeah, actually,
is usually the way that works.
Instead of using sprites and sprite sheets, like having 3D models, but only having like a 2-dimensional camera, or maybe even like a 2.5 dimensional where there is some Z, but you're still kind of locked to the one axis. Yeah. That's an interesting idea. And I was also thinking this platformer, it's left to right, up, down, but there's also the overhead, like Zelda, where you're kind of moving,
Which is the tutorial I played with in Default, was the one that's top down.
Yeah. And I'm like, I mean,
I don't think I did much beyond walk around.
Yeah, I don't really, I think doing a straight 2D left and right, up and down only kind of platformer feels a little limiting at this point and not as exciting. Like, I think it would be more fun to venture into the third dimension, whether that's fully the whole game is 3D or if it's like more of a 2.5D or if it's just the models or something like those are things I've never played with. So yeah, those kinds of things do excite me. And I also don't like the idea of having to draw a bunch of sprites because I'm not a visual artist. That's not, I mean, we'd have to bring someone in to do that. And I was kind of hoping you and I could handle most, if not all of this.
Well, that's probably true if we do a 3D model as well. I mean, I haven't done that in like 25 years, but it was hard then. I don't know how easy it is now. It's probably easier. But the other thing with sprite sheets for me, and what I have done in the past, is I will just download sprite sheets from other games and use them while I'm developing. And then it wouldn't be until I actually cared to release that so like Link can be running around my game.
Right.
It's fine.
Yeah. And I mean,
I don't care.
There's like game dev subreddits where people are often saying, here, I just made a bunch of free art for your game. Asset
There's
packs.
a ton of that stuff out there.
Yeah, and I'm also okay with doing that
because again, that's not what we're interested in doing.
Right? Yeah, I'm at this point, I'm not interested in becoming a better visual artist. So. It does bring up another point about what makes a game interesting and what makes it stand out, because coming up with cool mechanics is, the fun part for us as devs, but also the harder thing to do, because coming up with a novel, unique mechanic is tough, and the easier way to make your game stand out is the art, because if it looks different from another game, that immediately makes that dopamine rush of like, as you're looking through screenshots of new games, you're like, ooh, what's that? That looks interesting. But that's also a strong suit to make a visually distinct, interesting looking game.
For me, I would be thrilled to make a game that caught on because it had such a good game loop, like Balatro, or I'm playing Hades 2 right now. It just like actually released. I refused to play it while it was in early access. And I'm not even good at it, and I find myself drawn into its game loop constantly. It does such a good job. I was starting to pay attention to it last night when I was like, okay, I'll quit after this run. And then I wasn't. I'm like, okay, what is keeping me doing this? And I realized what it is you do the actual game, right? Where you go into effectively the dungeon, and you fight your way through until you die.
Yeah.
Right? But I've gathered resources during that, and now I come back to my home, right? And I can use those resources to make it so that next time I do the run, it's a little bit easier. And I usually I like that part. And I'm like, well, I could just set that up before I go, because I don't want to forget what resources I just got, right? So I could set that up, get myself ready to go, so I don't have that part. And then I'll stop there, and then next time I can just jump straight in. But I'm like, oh, I just made myself a really cool build. Now I kind of want to go test that. And then I go back in and I find something else. And then I go back, right? And it's just like, it keeps me going.
Yeah.
And I think it's like that game loop, that hook. Because the same thing with Balatro. Like all the, I was going to say net hack likes, what are they called? Roguelikes.
Yeah.
Or roguelites. I think these are lights because they're not.
They're not like Rogue, but they have.
Yeah, they are the vague, you like live, die, repeat.
Yeah, but get better and improve along the way.
Yeah. And make your character better, make you better.
Yeah.
Right. I think those have a really simple to quantify game loop. And then there's other things where like it's going to be the plot that does it, or the art that does it, or the voice acting that does it, or some combination of all those. Like something is the hook for you. For me, it's usually just the game loop and the game mechanics are what I am drawn to. I rarely care about the plot or the characters in a game. When I want that, I read books. But I like them to have some level of it.
Yeah,
right?
you don't want them to be programmer art, because it could be the best loop ever. Like it could be Hades 2 with programmer art, and it would not sell.
I'd probably do better at it, honestly. There'd be less stuff on the screen. I'd get less confused. But like, think about something like Vampire Survivors. It's not.
Yeah, it's not super
particularly.
But
right, and it's super fun.
Yeah, the loop is
and
so
it gets to
tight.
the point where my computer can't handle it. Yeah,
yeah.
And so it's like I think that's where it's like I think we have a couple ideas where we could do something like that. It would be once we find a mechanic that we like playing with. Like that's why I picked the slingshot thing, right? It's like, okay, if slingshot is, and also it's easy to do on mobile and web. Like if it's click if it's click drag, you can do that on every platform. And so it's like, okay, let's say that's what we're doing. That's easy. How do I make that fun? Is this fun? Okay, great. Now we can build a game around that.
Yeah.
And we have kind of various settings that we thought would be fun to do. I don't know. That's my 17 cents. It was way more than two.
Well, I'm curious because I was trying to kind of put the focus on this episode specifically about like a game engine that we can agree on, and one of the reasons why I think that's important is the sharing part of our project.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Hey, how do you share a game project with another dev? So that it's easy to make changes and see those changes and not overwrite each other and et cetera, et cetera. And, each of these different engines we've talked about have slightly different ways of doing that. The one thing about the Love 2Ds and the Pico 8s and the Tech 80 is that they're just text files. They're just Lua files. You put them in any Git repo. It's like any other project. If you jump into something like Game Maker or Unity or Godot, sorry, not Godot. They have scene files, but they're plain text, so it's fine. But something like Game Maker or Unity or probably Unreal Engine, their projects or their files are binary, so they're not text. You can't just read them with any text editor, and you need to use the IDE to interpret them. That's harder to share easily because if you make like a change, like the kinds of changes the file will actually make if you look at it in a text or hex editor or something is going to be weird and harder to quantify at the commit level. I mean, I'm sure game developers
like it's doable. Obviously, people do
Obviously, yeah.
But it's like more overhead than we want to deal with right now. I think is where we landed on it.
I love
and
the
then
idea
there was
of
ones
just
that are
text
super
files.
easy. Yeah, Love 2D for me, like it was the sweet spot there. Everything's text, great, done. Right, that's obvious Git. And then the ones we were looking at, Defold and Godot, land kind of in the middle, and that's where most of it's text based. But right, you got some things, and that's gonna be true of anything where if you have like audio files or whatever.
Yeah, I think Defold and Pico 8 are very similar in that most of it's text, but some of it are like a dot collection file or something is text, but is not meant to be human readable. And so you want to load that in the IDE. Pico 8 has like all of its art and sound is just text. You can look at it in a text editor, but it obviously doesn't make any sense to a human. It has to be interpreted by the program. But you can easily put that in a Git repo. And if you change like a pixel in an art asset and push that up, the other person will see the commit as like that one, couple text characters changed.
Yeah.
So mainly because I worked in Defold for several hours yesterday, I'm leaning towards that. But I also could be open to like, well, maybe I should also try out Godot, or maybe I should try to do more in Love 2D and then come back again after a while and say, okay, I tried those out as much as I tried Defold. I think I like those better, or I think I like them worse. I don't know. What do you want to do?
I think Love 2D or Defold would be where I would go.
Okay.
I like Godot, but I think all of the things that I like about Godot are available in Defold. And Defold and Love 2D are both Lua.
Yeah.
And Lua seems like a good thing to learn. So I'd lean towards those two. I will say Love 2D didn't feel to me like it was going to scale super well. But that's a gut instinct of just like, how big is this game going to get? And how complicated, like what's the organizational system look like for my files? And like what the scope of it is. But I haven't really looked at its examples to know. Love 2D is going to require more external tools probably than Defold, but Defold will require some external tools just as much as like Love 2D will, but I think Defold will do it slightly less.
Yeah.
I'm happy with either of them. I will say I found Love 2D just like incredibly straightforward to use, and I really liked that aspect of it. And Defold does tie us into its editor to some extent. And I think that's also going to play into it. Like Love 2D would put things 100% in our control. Defold would take some of it out of our hands, which is a double-edged sword, right? So it's like, do we want to lean on the parts that it gets us over the parts that it doesn't? Like, what's more important to us there?
Yeah, and I think because I haven't done as much recent work in Love 2D, it's hard to speak to that. So I think I need another week or two to kind of fully explore that. So maybe we're not quite ready to make that decision. One thing I did have some notes about using Defold that I thought were kind of odd. Their editor feels a little a little undercooked compared to just VS Code, for example. I'm a big fan of folding functions. I know you're not as big a fan of that, but like when there's a file that has, because it's basically full of scripts based on whether it's like a player or an enemy character or the level or the game itself. I don't know how OOP most defold things get. Like if you start breaking these up into lots of little files, I'm sure you can. I just didn't get that far. But like there's no code folding. There's no word wrap. You can't just like Command X a line to get rid of it. I've gotten so used to deleting a line, which you would do with like DD and Vim, but with just like Command or Control X, you can't do that in the editor.
That's why I wouldn't. That's weird.
You have to highlight it
first
and then exit, but you can't just X on a line, which I've used in VS Code.
Oh,
almost imperceptibly.
You can do it. Okay, wait. No, I never do that. Now I have to try this right now.
Yeah.
Hang on.
You just go to a line and press Command X, and boom.
Okay, I'm on a line.
It's gone.
Command X. What the? Okay, actually, I don't know that I like that. I always highlight my line. So if nothing is selected, it deletes the line.
Yeah.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't use that ever. I didn't know about that until just now. That's kind of neat,
but
also not a thing I would have ever thought of.
I've gotten really used to it. Like I said, it's my DD in VS Code.
Yeah.
Also, it has palettes, and by palettes I mean like the little contextual windows that like show your files or show a specific file's properties that you're working on. You can't move them. You can't rearrange them. Also, you can only have one project open per instance of defold. So, for example, I was trying to figure out how one tutorial did a specific thing so that I could modify it in mine. And so I often like want to have multiple projects open so I can see them at the same time and kind of compare and contrast. You have to open another defold instance just to open up another project. Whereas in VS Code, you can have as many instances open in one thing. These are obviously little nitpicky things. They're not deal breakers, but it was just like, why does this not work this way? Like, this is a solved problem. Why are they doing it this way? And I'm just like, that's odd. So
it is odd.
You know, it has some weird rough edges. I was actually looking up about how this editor came about. I was just curious because I didn't know anything about it. And apparently it was made by a couple guys who worked at Avalanche Studios, which is, to me, most well known for making the Just Cause games.
Oh,
which I love Just Cause.
I like those games a lot.
And I don't know if that
Those are
means
very
they
fun
made
games.
Just Cause into Fold. That would be super impressive if they did. I doubt they did. But then they were acquired. Let's see. Was Avalanche Studios? Oh, no. I guess Defold is actually owned by King, which makes like Candy Crush, which is why the whole...
Oh, them. Okay.
This is a popular editor to make like mobile games. I can see the
Which is, I
connection
think, about the level that we're probably going to end up building, but like mobile in the style that we want.
Yeah, exactly. Mobile, but good. We're not going to have... This is not going to be... If this actually goes mobile like iOS, Android, this is not going to be like a free-to-play ads, pay to get rid of the ads. We're not going that route, right?
No.
Okay, good.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either. I'm putting that on the
If
cast.
I'm going to charge for a game, it's a one-time charge.
Yeah.
I don't like subscription things. I don't like pay to win.
You pay,
Like,
you play the game.
I think things should just be. I think everything should just be free.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a big old communist, so like whatever. But like, right. But realistically, like it makes sense to get paid back, right? Like if you have something on iOS that's costing you at least $100 a year just to have it there,
Yeah.
getting paid back something would be nice.
Yeah.
If you're running servers on the back end, maybe that's when you start charging for like a subscription.
Right.
Right. When you have upkeep every year.
Yeah.
But so like, yeah, there's places, but like cover your costs. Don't be exorbitant. I liked when games were at 99 cents. Right. That was great. You go on to the App Store. I'm like, I'm bored. I'll download this thing.
Yeah.
Here, here's the free version. Cool. That seemed neat. I don't want to see ads. 99 cents gone.
Yeah.
And like that was the golden era of iOS games.
But I also like, obviously making a game that can be played across multiple platforms is the ideal. Like something you can load up on your desktop, but you can also play on your phone would be great. But when I think of mobile games, like mobile first games or mobile specific games, I think of, at this point, garbage games that I play for like a minute. I'm like, oh, that was fun. And then I delete and I never play again. And I'm not really interested in making that kind of game. Like I kind of want to make a game with depth. So I think from my standpoint, what kind of the next thing to do is I spent a good deal of time in Defold working on a tutorial, messing around. I feel like I have a basically good idea for at least a sprite-based game. I haven't played with 3D. I haven't played with drawing graphics directly to the screen like something you do in Love 2D. I don't know if that's something I'd want to do, but I like the idea of generating the graphics over making a bunch of static graphics that we have to continually update. But I just haven't gotten that far in it. So I'd like to do more of that in Defold, but I think I personally would also like to do roughly the level that I've done in Defold in Love 2D and see if I can get something, like get a little platformer where you have an avatar that moves around and jumps and can do things. So that's for me, that's kind of what I'm going to be doing.
I think a lot of this is going to come down to like what kind of game are we making. I think if we want to go with the like Fallout Zelda out, right? If we were going to do that, I think we could do it in either one. I'd probably lean towards Defold. If we were going to do a darts game, I'd probably do it in Love 2D because like it doesn't have scenes.
Yeah.
Right. Like if we're going to be moving a character from scene to scene or like have levels or whatever, we're probably going to want Defold because we can visually lay those out. And I think that's probably where I'll use the IDE and not any other time. In that is like setting up that kind of thing. Because I was rereading my notes about Love 2D, and a lot of it is that like we're gonna have to get it's a lot more bare metal.
Yes,
it's okay. You want to do this thing? Great, you can do that. Go download this plugin, kind of, or this. What was it? It was I don't think they call them plugins, but these assets or whatever, right? And I think that's fine. But also, like even some of their stuff with like networking in Love 2D was lower level. Then I was like, really? You want to make me do that?
Yeah, I think they both have the like, okay, you're making a game concept, as opposed to you're making a spreadsheet or a web page. But Defold definitely has more of a larger picture from the start. It kind of puts you in that. Okay, we get where you're going with this. You're not just trying to make a square on the screen. You actually are trying to make the whole enchilada. So it sets you up that way. So like I said, it kind of brings you into the process at a different point. The script files in Defold, like the player script or the level script, that's basically Love 2D right there. Those scripts is what Love 2D does. It just doesn't have all the stuff around it. And so, maybe this is less like we use one and only one black and white thinking and more like Love 2D, since they both do Lua, Love 2D, like you said, is like the let's mess around with a mechanic that's fun. And then once we find the mechanic that's fun, then you go into Defold, which has okay, now you're actually making the game. Let's put your mechanic in there and add some sprites or add a 3D model or whatever, and a level and scenes and triggers and particles and blah, blah, blah. And it has more of that stuff as more helper stuff for that visually.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
I think probably we won't want to stick around in if we're going to transition, we'll probably want to get transitioned over relatively quickly, just because there will be some porting, but I can't imagine it's going to be that hard to do.
Yeah.
And we could probably throw AI at it if we had to. I'm trying to keep that in mind a lot is like, I don't have to do all the boring parts anymore. There are tools that will do that for me. So like playing around and getting something working in Love 2D and being like, hey, translate this over to Defold for me real quick. And then opening it up in there is not unreasonable.
Yeah. Well, and either of them, we can easily make repos for the stuff we're working on and share it. So that's the nice thing.
Exactly.
They both work decently for that.
I have a game idea that I want to try that I think would work really well, which is basically slingshot mechanic for disc golf kind of thing. And I'll see. I'll try turning. I'm already halfway there on Left 2D.
Okay.
So I'll try taking that and actually making it work the way I want it to work. I actually started to try. I tried to take my side view of that, which is where down is the bottom of the screen, and tried to make the Z-axis be down physics wise, which kind of worked, but got real confusing real fast. But I'll see like how that works in both, and like see how hard it is to transition between them, and like have different levels or whatever. Yeah, could be fun.
Okay. I think it could be done in either. I just think as the scope increases, Defold might be easier to Yeah. I think making like a
Which makes the question of, do we just want to go there and just stay there so that we don't have multiple things we're trying to learn?
I mean, that's kind of up to you. I think we should be very agile about this, not actually like 2-week, burn down chart kind of stuff. But I mean, like, get an idea, put it up on GitHub, private, share it with me, let me see. Like, let's start shooting ideas,
Okay.
and don't worry about it being done. That. Just get an idea that's functional that I can download and look at and be like, this is cool. We need to go with this, or like, well, that's neat, but
Yeah, and let's stick with Defold and Love2D as the places where we're doing those things, so that we can get our systems set up to easily do that, so that we can like rapidly iterate on them. Because right now my system is not set up for that, as we learned earlier today.
Pre-podcast, there was a thing, that sounds good.
Yeah, okay, so like I said, I'm taking this week off of work, so maybe I'll play around with some of this stuff.
Okay.
And try to throw you some ideas.
Yeah.
And you can try them out, and vice versa.
I think iterative process here is good. And with something like Git and GitHub, where you can see the changes and track them and go back and forth between like, oh, before you added that feature, after you added that feature. I mean, that's the brilliance.
All right, that sounds like a plan to me.
Okay. Cool. Well, that has been our third episode in this Let's Make a Game season. And we have marching orders, so we're going to go do that. But hey, if you want to listen to our previous episodes where we talked about this initial idea and the kinds of things we like and don't like about games, go to hackingthegrepson.com. Plus, we have a whole other season before that. It's about all different kinds of fun technical programming stuff. And until the next time we talk at you about game making, we now return you to your regularly scheduled lives already in progress.